to D&D Beyond, live today with special guest and returning champion, Xander Jeanneret. How are you doing today?
Woohoo! I didn't know it was a competition, but I'm here to win.
That's what we like to hear. So we have Xander here today, and we have a couple things that we're going to talk to him about. First off, I'm going to get some advice from you. You are one of the best people I've ever played with at somehow magically summoning coherent story into existence in a game, without it ever stopping being a game. So I'm going to make you tell me all your secrets on how
Oh,
that works,
goodness.
advice for both DMs and players on getting that to happen, and then in the back half of today's show, we are going to do the first iteration of what I am calling, at least to myself, tell me about your character. Because, of
Love
course,
it.
it's the most fun question in the world, and you are currently playing Travail Farfoot on G4 TV's Invitation to Party.
I sure
So
am.
you're gonna tell us all about Travail and his build in the back half. And we're so glad that you could join us today. If you have questions for Xander, please do be putting those in the chat, and the mods are going to feed them to me throughout our show.
Delicious questions.
So first off,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, because we were talking about this, and the way you phrased it really struck me. How can players and DMs loop story elements together through improv? So first
Mhm.
off, what do you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, well, I've found that there are a lot of principles of improv that if you find someone who's been to like a couple of improv classes, they will be happy to tell you all about because improvisers love to talk about improv. And
Much
again,
like
these
RPG
are all
people. We're just like, I learned
exactly.
these rules, they're cool, you will enjoy them.
Mhm. And they're made to be broken, but they can be handy guides in other areas. So a lot of these, the structure of improv comes in with finding, in the terms for improv, it's called the game. Tabletop, it might be something else called the game, but in this one, it's what is the like point of the scene that you're trying to do, or what are the things that you're playing with, either between yourself and an NPC or yourself and another player character. So it's identifying that and then finding out what was either funny or interesting there, and then bringing that in as either a character development moment or something that you store away for later to come into the story. So, for instance, if we have a transactional scene between me as the DM as an NPC and your character, we might find ourselves in the game of you think that my prices are too high, but I think that you're being rude about it. You know what I mean? So we
Mm-hmm.
establish now that your character may be a little bit stingy, or this NPC might be charging too much and there might be some injustice happening. Those loops you can bring back either later on in the campaign or become a reoccurring theme for either of these characters.
So over time, if I'm in here and I want to buy some healing potions and I'm complaining about your prices,
Hmm.
that might be just something that I made up in the moment because I wasn't sure what to say to make it interesting that I'm buying healing potions.
Or you don't have
But
enough
you,
gold or whatever it
hmm
is. Exactly.
uh, so how do you approach this first as a player? How do you spot
Mhm.
one of these opportunities, or how do you sort of lay it down without feeling like you're bending the game into a certain shape?
Ooh, I love that question because my first instinctual answer was as a player, I like to create those moments. So I go into it. We've talked about this before with a character concept with limitations. That's something that I played with my character Ricky Huckster, for example, on Relics and Rarities. I decided that he was going to be stingy in quite a similar situation in a session zero. And I was like, I've never played like a real miserly, stingy character who's counting every silver copper piece. You know what I mean? And it became such an interesting theme of his throughout the whole thing that, little moments like that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have run with it. You know what I mean?
So I would say an observation from that is that you tried something or you said something and you noticed as a player, you're like, oh, actually, that's fun. I haven't done that before. Leaning into
Yeah.
that more may give me more to do. So it's sort of spotting that response in the moment and being like, let's try some more of this.
Yeah, not only that, but also stacking these things on top of each other to create a layered character. So
Mhm.
if, for instance, that happened in the session 0, so I knew going into, like, session 1 that Ricky was this miserly potions master, but also I wanted him to be a druid flavored, in the certain way of, like, an alchemist. So the fun for me was coming up with the different flasks or, vehicles for the potions and what they did, all of which were improv exercises that I was like, I need to write these down so that they can come back later when I cast these spells again, and then it becomes a reoccurring thing.
Now, this is mostly something that you were doing on your own as a player, but is there a
Mhm.
way in which, let's say, like a great DM like Deborah Ann Wall picks up on or helps you push that forward?
Yeah. Oh, one of the best examples of this, again, during Relics and Rarities, is the conversation that I had with Deborah of in the first adventure, Ricky picked up like a mysterious ingredient, and I'm like, well, he's like an alchemist. That's what they do. They sort of collect things. And I was like, okay, we don't know what this is going to lead to, but we know that there will be a payoff later. And so that's where we appealed to both of our storytelling and improv skills of like, we're keeping this question open, and then spoilers for Relics and Rarities. Later on, there came a need for me to make a resurrection potion, and we both had the instant thought of like, "Oh, we could use the ingredients that I've collected along the way as like a memory collector thing as part of the potion." It became like a great iconic moment that still lives in my heart.
Oh, that's a wonderful
Yeah.
example. So, what advice do you have that you've either tried as a DM or seen in other DMs for using this idea to make things feel both spontaneous and coherent?
Yeah. Oh, I, probe my players all the time, especially as a DM. A lot of people on D&D Beyond, if they're tooling with and remaking a character, they will fill in some of these boxes, or it'll auto-fill in some of these choices of, like, life decisions, that you make as a character. And one of my things is I like to go into the campaign and see what things people have filled out, because that
He's
tells you
reading
what
your
they
notes.
I'm reading your notes. I totally am. Because that helps me bring those things into the campaign and maybe even loop them into a reoccurring theme that I can have between all of the characters. And
Mhm.
like the thing is, as a DM, it gives me goosebumps to do that because the players notice and they feel like they have agency in what they're doing. The choices that they have made have agency in the world.
Do you have any sort of like an anonymized example, maybe, of a time that you were able to weave something in like that?
Yeah, this is for, one of, like, a private game, sessions that I did, but, my player had come into it. He was relatively new to Dungeons& and Dragons and RPGs altogether, but he was like, "I don't know, I wanna be like a prince, a mer prince or something, like, under the sea." And so, I remember flavoring anytime that he was around, like, the tavern or something like that, every once in a while, an NPC would come up to be him and just say, "Your Majesty," in a hushed, secret tone. And it was just a way to flavor it so that he felt like a prince undercover, even though that wasn't part of my world building, but I loved where he went with it.
That's fantastic. Uh,
Yeah. And it got
how
to
does this
create some really
Oh, yeah.
juicy, like, story moments too.
Aw. How does this function differently, like, in one session versus over a long time?
Oh, so, one of my favorite things to do over a long campaign is to take a look back over my notes as a player and as a DM, and bring back some things that maybe were left in the past or forgotten about, because that always happens. We have a weapon that's in our inventory that we were gonna use and never did, or a feat or a skill or a spell or something like that, or a personality trait that maybe we can tweak or change, or, when I'm coming up with a character, one of the things that I like to do is figure out what journey are they on of personal growth, and where are they on that journey? You know what I mean? I'm starting off as a cleric that just got out of like the ministry or something like that, and eventually I want to be like the high holy ruler of this land. Where am I on this journey, and how can the game or the story facilitate that?
Uh, what advice for you would you have for folks who might not be as comfortable sort of doing this in the moment? Who are sort of like, I can read the notes, that's fine. I have a plan, but if you walk into a shop and I wasn't prepared, I have no idea how to get from there to maybe my prices are too high.
That's really hard, and I can empathize a lot with that too because as a LARPer, so I like there are a lot of skills that my characters have that I have to try to act out or do that I just don't have. I can't do a backflip here, but I did one, dang it. You know what I mean? So I feel that if someone is not familiar with improvising dialogue and they want their character to sound cool or to be suave and it just comes out as blah, I encourage DMs to really separate this and think about the roles. Either make it a story moment if the dialogue isn't happening, but the role matches that with like a low roll. Play into that, lean into maybe it didn't work this time, but it's not a defining character trait. Maybe something that you had for breakfast is causing you to be tongue tied when you're normally so charismatic. Maybe food poisoning, maybe something more nefarious. So that's a way you can sort of tie in accidents a la Bob Ross. It's just little happy story moments.
Now, let's say you felt like it went
Mm.
badly, but the role says it went well. How do you cover?
That is your DM's job or you as the DM. So no matter what this player has said, you have to roll with it as as the dice say. So they rolled a natural 20 and they say, "Oh, well, I really think your prices should be lower." And you as the miserly NPC, "Well, whoa, the accent you just used, that phrasing, it's from my hometown. Of course I
Ah,
must
a
lower the
Ratatouille
prices."
approach.
Yeah, yeah. Just drive them from the hat, you know? But, that's also a lot calling on the DM skill, and if you're just, a group of bankers that got together for D&D late at night, it can be hard. But I think there's sort of this contract that we all signed going into it that we're not all fantasy writers, but we wanna tell a story together, and that's I think the important thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Again, if you have any questions on this stuff, please throw them in the chat. Um, would you? Oh, hold on. Let's see. Lauren themselves actually hits us with one right
Eh.
now. How much thought do you put into character name selection as part of the creation process? Does the name always
Ooh.
relate to something else about them?
That's very interesting, and I will have to say there are separate instances where I'm able to come up with my character name, and sometimes I'm given my character name from whoever's making the world or the show. So for me, I don't know what it is, but I have like a process where I try to just think of a name that sounds good with what character concept I'm trying to make. It sounds really wishy washy, but for instance, on the show Failed Save, it was my home character, Bora. And I wanted her to be this furbolg who was bold and strong and loved arm wrestling type of thing. And something about the name Bora, I wanted like two syllables. I wanted it to be a B, you know what I mean? But it was still whimsical in some way. But, for
Yeah.
Invitation to Party, True Veil was actually B-Dave's suggestion. I think he has a calendar of some sort that's like a word of the day calendar, and, he had, like, saved that, True Veil as, like, a truth or luck, or something like that, and so he was like, "Oh, this would be perfect for this character," and I was like, "I agree."
Ah, excellent.
Yeah.
I'm a big name generator person myself, where it's just sort of
Mm.
like even if you don't pick one of the ones that you saw, something jars loose in your head where you're like the first
Yeah.
syllable of that and the second syllable of that. That's perfect.
Right, right. I remember coming up with there's another show that will be coming back that I do called Shikar on that Bronze Girls channel using D&D. That one, my character's name is Scorpio, but I haven't done anything with like the constellation or the Scorpio sign or anything like that. I just liked the name and sort of how it fit with the character.
A lot of
I also like
potent
one
imagery
word
there.
names.
No Percy's for you.
Yeah, yeah.
The fewer
Yeah,
titles, the better.
it's super long.
We do not need a tiny font to get your character names in.
Yeah.